Earl Thompson had lived long enough to see his country change a dozen times over. He had fought in 2 wars, buried his sweetheart after 60 years of marriage, and raised a son he could not be prouder of. A son who had followed in his footsteps and wore the uniform just like he once had. At 85 years old, Earl did not ask for much from the world anymore. His needs were simple. A warm cup of black coffee in the morning, a clean booth by the window, and a few friendly words from the waitress at a small roadside diner just outside of town. That was enough. The diner had been his morning ritual for over a decade. He liked how the sun poured through the front windows around 8 o'clock, how the light hit the countertop just right and warmed the place like a memory you never wanted to let go of. He always sat at the same booth, third from the door, back against the wall so he could see everyone who walked in. Not because he feared anything, those days were behind him, but because old habits died hard, especially for a soldier. Earl always wore his weathered army cap, the green so faded it looked more gray now. The fabric around the rim had thinned. The stitching was loose and the emblem on the front, his old division's insignia, was barely recognizable. But he wore it proudly. That hat was more than cloth and thread. It was the weight of memory. It was friends lost, orders followed, and silence held when stories were too heavy to tell. Most people in the diner knew him by name. The younger ones called him Mr. Thompson. The older ones still called him Sarge. To the waitstaff, he was simply Earl. They brought him his coffee without asking. A few locals had even offered to pay for his meals now and then, which he politely refused. He had never taken a handout in his life, and he was not about to start now. That Tuesday morning was like any other. The air was cool, the sky was clear, and the place smelled of pancakes and bacon grease. Earl was halfway through his second cup when the rumble started. Low at first, distant, then rising like thunder rolling through empty plains. He looked up from his cup, his eyes narrowing. That sound. He knew engines, and these were not the quiet kind. Moments later, 3 motorcycles pulled into the gravel lot outside the diner. They were loud, flashy, and obnoxious, the kind of bikes ridden by men who needed to announce their presence before they even stepped into a room. Chrome glinted in the sunlight, and the exhaust pipes coughed thick fumes as the engines shut off one by one. The door swung open with a sharp chime, and the diner grew quiet. The man who walked in first was big, not just in size, but in presence. He had a snake tattoo curling up the side of his neck, disappearing beneath a sleeveless vest covered in patches. His beard was long and unruly, his eyes sharp with mischief, and something colder beneath. He was followed by 2 others, thinner, but equally rough around the edges. The kind of men who thrived on chaos and fed off fear. They scanned the room quickly, taking in the diners with smirks and sneers. Then the leader's gaze landed on Earl. The man tilted his head. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Would you look at that? A real American hero." Earl looked up slowly. He did not flinch. He did not frown. He just stared at the man with the same calm he had worn through minefields and bullet storms. The biker walked over, boots thudding against the tile. "Nice hat, Grandpa," he said, mocking. "You get that at a costume shop? Or did you actually do something once?" The diner fell into a thick, uncomfortable silence. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died in throats. Earl sipped his coffee, then set the cup down. "Earned it," he said simply. The biker let out a harsh laugh. "Bet you earned it pushing. Papers in some safe office, huh?" Earl did not respond. He had heard insults in every language on earth. This one was nothing. That silence, steady, grounded, seemed to offend the biker more than any sharp reply would have. He leaned in, closer, his grin spreading. "You hard of hearing, old man?" Still nothing. The biker's hand swept across the table in a flash, knocking Earl's coffee cup to the floor. It shattered with a sharp crack. Hot liquid spread across the tile. Gasps echoed around the room. Earl looked down at the mess. Then slowly he pushed himself up from the booth. His joints creaked, his back stiff, but his eyes stayed locked on the biker's face the entire time. He did not say a word. The biker stepped forward and shoved him. Earl's balance faltered. He stumbled backward and hit the floor with a painful thud, his back striking the tile hard. For a brief second, the room was absolutely still. Then someone whispered, "Oh my God." Blood trickled from the corner of Earl's mouth. His cap had fallen off, lying a few inches away, the faded insignia, now upside down on the floor, but Earl did not cry out. He did not even blink. He looked up at the man standing over him, not with fear, not with anger, but with a quiet that chilled the spine. A silence earned not through age, but through decades of knowing what real pain looked like. The biker laughed. "War hero, huh? Must be losing your edge." No one in the diner moved. Not the cook, not the waitress, not the young couple by the window. Everyone had seen what happened, but no one knew what to do. Fear is a strange thing. It freezes the good people and it feeds the bad ones. Outside, a man sitting in a pickup truck had seen everything through the window. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. His voice shook as he left a voicemail. "Theer." Message was short. Just 6 words, but they carried weight. "He is hurt. Come quickly. Now." Back inside, Earl slowly sat up. A young girl across the diner began to cry. Her mother held her close and shielded her view. The biker picked up Earl's hat, turned it over in his hands, then tossed it onto the floor like garbage. Earl reached for it and placed it back on his head, adjusting it with quiet dignity. He still did not speak. And that was what made everyone in the room hold their breath. This was not just an old man on the ground. This was someone who had seen too much, survived too much, and endured far more than this fool could ever imagine. The waitress knelt beside him and whispered, "Do you want me to call the police?" Earl looked at her, then at the biker who was now laughing with his friends by the counter. "No," Earl said quietly. "But someone will come." And he was right. At precisely 9:43 a.m., Captain Marcus Thompson stood before a glowing digital screen in a locked strategy room inside Fort Ridgemont, a high-security U.S. military installation tucked into the edge of the forest 2 hours outside the city. His crisp uniform bore the marks of experience. Clean lines, a row of service ribbons, and the sharp, polished insignia of an officer who had earned every inch of his place. Marcus had been trained to control his breathing under pressure, to command calmly and to keep emotion out of the job. But when his phone buzzed and he saw the name flashing across the screen, Danielle, diner manager, his heart stopped for a moment. He had told her once, if anything ever happened to his father and he could not reach him, she was to call him, no matter what. And now she was calling. He stepped away from the table without a word, his team still engaged in a discussion about surveillance protocols for an upcoming field drill. No one asked where he was going. His posture told them not to. He slipped out of the room, his pace slow but his jaw clenched. The corridor was long and quiet, lined with framed portraits of military legends and command leaders. But all Marcus could hear was the soft buzz of the voicemail message waiting for him. He stepped into an empty briefing bay, locked the door behind him and pressed play. A shaky voice whispered into his ear, "He is hurt. Come quickly. Now. That was all. 6 words. 6 words that shattered every part of Marcus that had ever been trained to stay calm. He lowered the phone, stood still for a moment, and let the weight settle in. No details. No explanations. But he knew what it meant. His father, Earl Thompson, had been hurt. That should never have happened. Not to a man like him. Not in a town where everyone knew what kind of man Earl was. Marcus did not ask permission. He did not follow protocol. He moved with the cold, precise efficiency of a soldier with purpose. By 9:49 a.m., the base's flight line roared to life. Marcus emerged from the barracks in full gear, his sidearm holstered, his military-grade boots slamming against the concrete with every step. His team, 3 soldiers from his unit who had known him long enough to understand without words, followed immediately, not asking a single question. There was no time for questions. They had seen that look before. It was not fury. It was something deeper. Controlled rage. Honor awakened. The Black Hawk helicopter was prepped in less than 3 minutes. The pilot, a lean man with nerves of steel, gave a quick nod as Marcus climbed aboard. Destination? Marcus answered without looking back. Eastville Diner. Fastest possible route. Do not wait for civilian clearance. The pilot raised his brow slightly. Understood, sir. The engine ignited with a deafening roar. The rotors spun to life, kicking up dust and loose papers along the flight pad. Marcus secured his headset and looked straight ahead, not blinking as the ground pulled away from them and the machine climbed into the sky. Below them, the base shrank into a cluster of dots. Ahead, the clouds opened wide. The Black Hawk thundered across the open air, shaking the trees as it passed over rural highways and quiet neighborhoods. But inside that cabin, Marcus was somewhere else entirely. He was not sitting in a chopper. He was 8 years old again, sitting in the back seat of a rusted pickup truck as his father drove them to a local air show. He remembered how Earl had worn his service cap even then, still sharp in his discipline, still upright in posture. He had pointed at every aircraft that passed overhead and told Marcus its name, its purpose, and its power. But more than that, he had told him what it meant to wear the uniform, that it was not about pride or medals, but sacrifice, discipline, dignity, the strength to stand even when no one stood with you. Marcus remembered every bedtime story, not of fairy tales, but of real men who had crossed enemy lines to save their brothers. He remembered the long walks, the quiet lessons, the times his father would hand him a broom and say, "Start with the corners, the rest will follow." He had taught him that how you do one thing is how you do everything. That honor began in small places, and now someone had knocked that man to the ground in public. Someone had dared to raise a hand against Earl Thompson. The memory of that voicemail echoed again in Marcus's head. He is hurt. He gripped the edge of his seat. His team sat silently beside him, eyes forward, heads bowed slightly, not out of fear, but out of respect. They knew who Earl was. Every man on that chopper had heard his name over the years. He was not just a father to Marcus. He was a living legend to all of them. The kind of man who, even in retirement, walked like a soldier and treated janitors like generals. The radio crackled. "ETA, 9 minutes, the pilot said. Marcus gave a short nod. "Take us in low, circle twice before we land." "Yes, sir." As the diner came into view, the chopper lowered its altitude. Below, the gravel parking lot was filled with onlookers. People shaded their eyes and pointed upward. Children gasped. Some filmed the aircraft with shaky hands, not understanding what they were seeing. The sound was overwhelming. Machines like This were not meant to fly over diners in quiet towns. But this was not a military stunt. This was personal. Marcus could see the flashing lights of a sheriff's cruiser already in the lot. That was a good sign. Maybe justice had already begun. But that did not change what had been done. It did not erase the image he could see so clearly in his mind. His father, proud and worn, lying on the cold diner floor with blood on his mouth and coffee spilled across his boots. As the Black Hawk descended, the pilot guided it gently into the far end of the parking lot. Dust and leaves scattered. People shielded their faces. Some backed away, thinking a military operation was unfolding. In a way, it was. Marcus unbuckled, stepped out of the aircraft and began walking. His uniform gleamed under the sunlight. His face was carved in stone. He did not carry anger in his stride. He carried authority. Behind him, his 3 team members followed, flanking him quietly in perfect formation. The sound of the rotor blades faded behind them as they approached the diner. Inside, no one knew what was coming, but they were about to find out. Because this was not about revenge. This was about something far more permanent. This was about making the world remember what respect looks like. Inside the diner, the atmosphere had shifted into a tense stillness. The noise from earlier had died down into whispers and careful glances. Earl Thompson, still sitting in the corner booth, had refused the medical attention offered by a local EMT. A bruised lip and swollen cheek marked the side of his face, but his back remained straight, his pride unshaken. His cap, knocked off during the assault, rested on the table beside a half-spilled cup of cold coffee. His silence spoke louder than any words. He did not cry out. He did not complain. He just sat there, staring through the window as though searching the sky for something or someone. The biker who had struck him leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a smug smirk playing on his face. His leather vest bore the insignia of a local outlaw motorcycle crew, one known more for noise and attitude than any real violence. He cracked his knuckles occasionally, tossing glances toward the older man, seemingly proud of what he had done. He had not expected Earl to get up again, but he had. And somehow that made the man even more irritated. Most of the customers remained in the diner, unsure of what to do. No one had come forward. No one had stood up to the biker. Fear held them in place. The waitress who had screamed earlier now stood behind the cash register, quietly dialing the sheriff again, hoping backup would come quickly, but no one expected what happened next. It began as a low, strange vibration in the air, a distant hum that grew louder by the second. The silverware on the table started to clatter. The blinds swayed slightly, then shook. One man looked outside and muttered something under his breath. Others followed, peering through the glass as if a thunderstorm was rolling in. But this was no storm. The sound turned into a thunderous roar. Then came the wind. Napkins flew from tables. Dust swirled across the floor near the entrance. Outside, gravel kicked up and leaves lifted from the ground in wild spirals. Heads turned, cell phones were drawn, eyes widened. A massive Black Hawk helicopter descended into the diner's parking lot, its dark frame casting a long shadow over the asphalt. The downdraft from its rotor sent debris scattering. Car alarms blared. The force of the wind knocked over a trash can. People instinctively ducked. The biker stepped away from the counter, his smirk faltering. His eyes narrowed, confused. The chopper touched down with authority. The blades did not stop spinning. They beat the air with a rhythm like war drums. Then the side door opened. Marcus stepped down first. He moved with deliberate calm. His helmet was tucked under one arm, his military boots hitting the ground with a firm, confident strike. Behind him, 3 men emerged in full uniform, 2 in tactical gear, 1 in a service jacket with a state police badge shining on his chest. The team followed Marcus without a word, fanning into a formation that made it instantly clear. This was not a show, this was not ceremony, this was precision, controlled force, purpose. The diner fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups were set down. Even the cooks in the kitchen paused behind the swinging doors, watching through the open window. The biker stood frozen inside, his bravado leaking away with every step Marcus took toward the entrance. Marcus opened the diner door. The bell rang, once a quiet chime drowned almost immediately by the final thuds of the chopper blades behind him. He walked in without looking to either side. His jaw was locked tight. His eyes scanned the room in an instant and found the one face he had come for. His father, sitting near the window, his lip bloodied, his cheek bruised. Marcus went straight to him, not sparing a glance at the man who had done it. He knelt by his father, gently placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked into his eyes. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked, voice steady. Earl gave a faint nod, the tightness in his expression relaxing for the first time since the blow. He looked at his son, and a quiet pride passed between them, unspoken but clear. Marcus stood, slowly turned, and now looked directly at the biker. "You assaulted a decorated veteran," he said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "The biker scoffed. "What are you going to do about it, soldier boy? Call your mommy?" The room tensed. That was the wrong move. Marcus did not blink. Behind him, one of the uniformed men stepped forward. He held up a black device, tapped the screen, and turned it so the biker could see. On it was a live feed from the diner security camera. The exact moment the biker had raised his fist and struck Earl across the face. The biker's jaw tightened. Another man wearing the state trooper badge now stepped in. Calmly, no shouting. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs and addressed the biker directly. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault of a senior citizen and a decorated war veteran," he said. "You have the right to remain silent." The biker began to backpedal. "Wait, hold on. I did not mean to, I thought he..." But it was too late. His words fumbled as the officer grabbed his wrists and pulled them behind his back. The cuffs snapped shut with finality. Gasps echoed through the diner. No one clapped. Not yet. It was not over. As the biker was led outside, struggling to reclaim any piece of his earlier dominance, the crowd that had formed outside began to cheer quietly. Some clapped, others saluted. A small group of veterans standing near a pickup truck held their hats to their chests in silence. Inside, Marcus turned back to his father. "Let us go home," he said. Earl rose slowly, leaning slightly into his son's arm, but standing proud. He retrieved his cap from the table and placed it firmly on his head. As they began to walk, the crowd inside the diner parted without hesitation. No one stood in their way. Some reached out to shake Earl's hand. Others simply nodded. As they exited, the wind from the chopper had slowed. The sun now broke through the cloud cover overhead, casting a golden beam across the parking lot. Marcus guided his father to the waiting SUV that had pulled up beside the helicopter. Earl paused, looked at the town he had lived in for decades, and gave one final glance to the diner where everything had happened. Then he smiled, not because justice had been served, but because respect had returned and everyone had seen it happen. The early morning sun cast a warm glow over the quiet street as Earl Thompson sat on the front porch of his modest, weather-worn home. The wooden boards beneath his boots creaked softly each time he shifted his weight, but he made no effort to move. A blanket folded neatly over his lap rested just above his hands marked by time, war, labor, and silence. Across the street, the town of Eastville carried on with its usual rhythm. Cars passing slowly, dogs barking in backyards, the occasional burst of laughter from children headed toward the school bus stop. But something was different now. The people walked a little slower when passing his house. Some paused, some looked up, meeting his eyes and giving a respectful nod. He nodded back, never rising, never calling attention to himself. The incident at the diner, what the news was now calling the helicopter justice, had erupted across the nation overnight. A local teenager had captured the entire scene on their phone, from the moment the helicopter touched down to the biker's arrest. The video had gone viral within hours. News anchors across the country shared it under headlines like "Honor in Action," "Veteran Gets Justice," and "Military Son Delivers Message Without a Word." But inside that home, the man at the center of the storm said nothing. He too did not chase the spotlight. He had never needed it. He was not angry. He was not interested in vengeance. All he had wanted that day was a hot cup of black coffee in the booth by the window. A ritual he had kept since his wife passed away 12 years earlier. He had not gone to the diner expecting recognition. In fact, he had gone hoping for anonymity. But fate had a way of calling attention to those who tried hardest to avoid it. Reporters had arrived early that morning, cameras slung over their shoulders, hoping for a statement. But the gate stayed closed. Earl had declined every request. "I have nothing to say," he had told Marcus the night before. "What happened speaks loud enough." The statement had been short, quiet, and final. Marcus respected it. He knew his father's nature, the man who gave everything in silence, who believed that dignity was not something worn but something carried in your walk, your voice, your restraint. Still, Marcus returned that morning. He arrived in a plain SUV without uniform or fanfare. He walked up the porch steps, nodded, and took a seat beside his father. The porch creaked again under his weight. They sat for a long while without speaking. The birds chirped. A breeze tugged gently at the leaves of the oak tree in the front yard. The old flag hanging from the porch post fluttered faintly, its edges frayed but its stars still bold. Finally, Earl broke the silence. His voice was low, not weak but worn. "I was not angry," he said, more to the air than to Marcus. "Just tired of the world forgetting." Marcus turned to look at him. He did not reply at first. He let the weight of the words settle between them. Then he spoke. "They will remember now." Earl nodded. A slight smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "I did not want attention, I just wanted coffee." That made Marcus laugh softly, and after a pause, Earl chuckled too. It was the first time they had laughed together in a while, and though the sound was brief, it held something real. It held peace. Across the street, a small group of high school students had gathered near the fence. Word had spread quickly among the younger generation, not just through news outlets but through social media, shared TikToks, and screenshots sent through group chats. The students had seen the footage, heard the narration, read the comments from thousands of strangers around the country. And here he was, the man from the video, the one who had not yelled, who had not fought back, who had simply endured. One of the students, a tall boy with a varsity jacket, stepped forward. He stood at the edge of the sidewalk looking across the street. Then, quietly, he raised his hand in a salute. He did not smile. He did not call out. He just stood there, hand to forehead, back straight, face solemn. A few seconds passed, another student followed, then another and another. Within a minute, nearly a dozen teenagers stood in a loose row, all facing the porch, all saluting. No one had instructed them. No teacher had told them to do it. It had come from somewhere deeper, a quiet instinct to honor what they had witnessed. Earl shifted in his seat again. He looked at the group, eyes narrowing slightly to see through the morning light. He hesitated, not out of pride, but out of the shock that something like this was happening. Slowly, Marcus stood, then turned and extended a hand toward his father. "Come on," he said. "They are not doing that for me." Earl took a breath, reached out and grasped his son's arm as he rose to his feet. His back cracked softly as he stood, but once up, he stood tall. He adjusted his cap, buttoned his jacket, and took a few steps forward to the edge of the porch. He looked at the group across the street, his gaze steady. Then, slowly, with perfect form, Earl Thompson raised his right hand in return and gave a crisp, solemn salute. The students held their pose, their faces tight with emotion. Some of them looked like they might cry. Others simply stood motionless, lips pressed together, their phones forgotten in their pockets. After several seconds, Earl lowered his hand, nodded once, and stepped back. That single moment would be captured again, this time not by news crews or official reports, but by the students themselves. Someone snapped a photo. Someone else took a short video. The clip, less than 10 seconds long, would spread even faster than the original diner footage. It was titled simply, "He Saluted Back." Within 12 hours, it had received over 5 million views. Veterans from all over the country began commenting. Some shared their own stories of being ignored in public, of being mocked, dismissed, forgotten. Others simply wrote "thank you." One post read, "This man did more in silence than most do with a microphone." Another, "This is what America should look like." Within days, the mayor of Eastville issued a formal commendation. A flag was flown in Earl's honor at City Hall. But Earl never stepped onto a stage. He never accepted a plaque. He returned to his porch each morning with the same quiet rhythm, nodding to strangers who passed, never expecting recognition. And yet, something had shifted in the town. Strangers began paying for veterans' meals in local diners. Children asked their grandparents questions about service and war. High school seniors began inviting local veterans to speak at assemblies, not to lecture, but to be seen, to be remembered. Earl never claimed credit for any of it. He only said once while reading the paper one morning, maybe people just needed a reminder. That was all. Back on the porch one afternoon, Marcus asked him if he regretted not fighting back that day. Earl shook his head. "There is more strength in restraint than in rage," he said. That man expected violence. What shook him was dignity. Marcus nodded. He understood now. The helicopter had brought attention, yes. The uniforms had delivered justice. But it was Earl's stillness, his refusal to meet hate with hate, that had truly changed hearts. And so the days passed. The porch remained the same. The oak tree grew a little taller. The flag flapped in the wind. And somewhere, in neighborhoods far beyond Eastville, someone would hear the story for the first time and feel something inside them stir. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude, or simply the sense that quiet men like Earl Thompson still existed, men who had earned every wrinkle, every scar, every morning cup of coffee in peace. And maybe that was the real message the world had needed all along. Not rage, not revenge, but the simple power of a man who stood, was knocked down, stood again, and said nothing. Because in that silence, the world finally listened.